Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I did prepare a short presentation that I will share on my screen and dive into in a little bit, just kind of as a guiding post of kind of things that I want to cover and talk to all of you about. But really, I think as an accountant, I am here to tell you a little bit more about why it might not be the stereotype that you traditionally might have thought what an accountant do, and pique your interest, hopefully, a little bit in sort of the profession and the career itself. Before we dive into that piece, just a quick background. So, Anita Chan here. John mentioned audit department. So, my title is officially audit partner with KPMG. And I have been with the firm for, I would just keep it to over 16 years at this point in time. And I am actually a Trojan myself. So I am very delighted to have this opportunity, right, to come talk to all of you. I was in your shoes sort of many moons ago. I went undergrad, I did study in accounting. So I was in the Leventhal School. And then I did the master's in accounting as well. And during that period, I had the opportunity to do some internships that led me to ultimately the career path that I am in now as a auditor. And maybe before we dive further into that as well, it's just a little bit of, did I always wanted to be an auditor or an accountant? I think the answer is just like most would expect, no. I don't think that was the first intention. I actually got admitted to SC as a pre-law econ major student. And I took my intro to law class, constitutional law, as well as econ classes, and quickly realized I'm not sure if that was the right path for me. And so I moved into Marshall and got a little bit more exposure to the general kind of business classes, including an intro to accounting course. That's sort of where it got me into the path that I am in now. So that's a little bit about where I am. And then over the course of my presentation, and again, is a very light presentation, you'll see why I mean about that. You will hear a little bit more about what I actually do, kind of the different roles, and kind of how I have, I would say, meandered and continue to expand my experiences at the firm. So I'm going to pull up my screen. Maybe you will give me a second. I will share with you the slide deck that I have pulled together. So the life of an accountant, nothing fancy. So let's start with the perception. I think most of you would agree that there is this perception of number crunching, sitting by yourself in a crazy desk with a lot of papers, things are messy, and all you do is look at numbers all day, and it creates a headache. I mean, part of it, maybe there's some elements that does come through where I do look at numbers. I do partially, as my personal kind of doing, of I do like to print things out still to a certain extent. So I have some papers floating around. But largely speaking, that's not really true, especially for kind of what I do as an auditor. And so maybe we take a step back of saying, well, what are we talking about here when we speak of accountants? Because there are a lot of different types of accountants that you could go into. So maybe just to give you a little bit of what is the reality to a certain extent. So we have accountants that do traditional, what we'll call bookkeeping for a company. So they will go work for a company, a corporation, think of, you name it, like Disney, let's say, and start recording numbers that creates the financial statements ultimately for the company. You have accountants that do what many of you might be more familiar with or here on the street is you must do taxes. You must file taxes for people or for companies. So there is certainly the type of tax accountants that we speak of. And then you have those sort of in my realm that are in what I would call the public accounting space as well, where you work for a public accountant. And within a public accounting firm, there are actually a lot of different divisions and roles that we play. So largely speaking, there are audit, tax, and the last piece is called advisory. which is just a fancy term to a certain extent for consulting. So for most large accounting firms, and you might have heard of this, but in the general speak, the marketplace would refer to big four accounting firms. So there's KPMG, which is the firm that I work for. There's PwC, Ernst & Young, as well as Deloitte and Touche. So those comprise of the big four. And then there are also a whole host of very successful accounting firms as well that we refer to kind of mid-tier that are more the regional, as well as potentially boutique firms that are focusing on certain aspects of accounting. And then outside of that, you have more the advisory consulting firms as well who are in this accounting space. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth later on. So as you already probably get a feel, there are a lot of different types of accountants, and just by you calling yourself an accountant doesn't mean you do the same thing. So my focus today will be a little bit more on the auditing side, given that's my experience. But if you have any questions at the end about some of the other elements as well, I'm more than happy to share and address that. So I have three big pictures here on what some of the reality are. I try to keep it all in the picture format because I'm not really want to write a lot of words on the slide for you. So what are they representing here? I'll start in the middle. So as an auditor in a public accounting firm, unlike the previous perception that you might have seen single persons sitting there crunching numbers and tons of paper surrounding them, we actually work in teams almost all the time. So this is the picture in the middle that depicts a teamwork environment. Our audit teams range from 2 to 3 people to one of my main clients actually in New York. We have 70 people in total in the team. And so every time I go visit them on a monthly basis, I meet new people, and it's part of my personality. I think it's fantastic. So you will see this picture sort of depicts a teamwork environment where everybody is collaborating, working together. And that is a critical skill set that I think many forget when you think of accountants, that I don't just sit behind a computer screen, but I have to do a lot of communication, both written and oral. And that's kind of critical in the success of our profession. And then you have a little bit of this sort of light bulb looking for ideas. And I think a lot of it is what I want to get at is the innovation of not just looking at numbers all day long. A lot of it comes to creating value for our clients in understanding their needs and the challenges that they face, right? So strictly speaking, for a financial statement auditor, what I would do, my job is I would go in, work with my client, understand their deadline, so why they have to get the financial statements audited, what is their timeline, bring my team along, and we will have a work plan that is designed to perform the procedures that are needed to audit the financial statements. So maybe taking a quick step back, right? Well, what does auditing the financial statements even mean to begin with? So if you think about it, the way that I would describe it, the best way is sort of a check and balance. So making sure the company's financial information, how much they say they have in cash, how much they say they have in terms of their inventory or other assets they own, or liabilities, so loans, money that they owe to the bank or other folks in the market, is in fact kind of accurate within reason. So we are sort of the police, for lack of better terms, to kind of check the information before it goes to the public, especially most of the public accounting firms audit clients, or the portfolio of companies that we audit, are publicly registered, meaning you can go and buy their stocks and trade on their stocks. And for those of you that might have experience in doing that would know that an important piece of it is likely to look at their financial performance information to date, so that you can get a sense of maybe the company has cash, turnover issue, and maybe it's not a good time to invest in them, or potentially they have disclosed something about their future expansion plan, and that might be something that drives your interest in investing in them. So our job is, in essence, to protect the investors by making sure the information that is out in the public is reliable. So that's a little bit of that. Now, then you would say, well, that sounds great. Okay, you might do procedures to check their information across the year. Where the sort of innovation and creativity comes in, don't you just look at the numbers and see if it's right or wrong and what evidence they have? That's probably the original old archaic way, but over, I would say, the last decade or so, even myself being in the profession have seen a huge evolution where we're trying to bring a lot of technology, as lately as the last 2-3 years with AI being a hot topic. How do we find efficiency and effectiveness in the work that we do so that it is more meaningful to provide insights to both us from a understanding the company's risk performance perspective as well as the client's need, right? So I think that is very fascinating to me because even though you might think, wow, you've been in the profession for so long, don't you get bored? Well, the answer is not really, because how you audit has changes over the years that you have to encompass and take into consideration. The other thing that I would kind of mention is then now bringing out a little bit of my specific experiences. Yes, I have been with KPMG for a long time. I'm currently in the LA office and I started in the LA office. But over this period of times, I actually have moved around quite a bit. So I started out, like I mentioned, KPMG LA doing audit. But after about 4 years, I was like, well, is audit really something that I want to do for a longer period of time? So within the firm, I actually found opportunity and did a 3 months rotation in what we called our advisory function. So the consulting piece that I talked to you about earlier, focusing on technical accounting advisory services to clients. So think about, well, how do you know the numbers are right or wrong? There's a set of rules that govern that. And for certain of them is actually very complex in terms of how do you interpret it based on the facts and circumstances of the business transaction. So on the advisory, accounting, consulting side, that's where we come in as experts to help companies to decipher and decode some of that complex regulation and figure out how do they actually put it into numbers term and get it ready for audit purposes. So I had experience of that for a few months and then quickly realized my heart is kind of still with the audit practice, so I went back to it. But then that didn't end there, because after a few more years, I then had an opportunity where the firm was like, do you want to move out to New York for a large client of ours that was looking for my industry experience? And I said, well, at that point in time, I've always loved New York, so why not? So I actually moved out there. It was for a large consumer products company, let's call them chips and soda company. And I was fascinated by the company's, I would say, kind of work that they have in terms of the transactions, what goes into the marketplace. And then I found my place quickly as sort of the lead senior manager at that point in time for that specific audit. It was very rewarding, right? Not only did I get to learn a lot, but I also got to meet all of KPMG's sort of New York office folks, expanding my network further beyond just the LA Pacific Southwest, what I would call the region that we belong in. So then after that, I spent 4 years on that client. And then I went to what we would call as the national office. So that's also New York based. Almost all the large public accounting firms have this function where it's focused on the technical aspects of things. So I went in and I spent 2 years there, learned a lot about technical auditing, how standard setting works, as well as the accounting side as well. And then how do you effectively push out communication and policy of changes to all of the US professionals that we have across KPMG when a change is needed. So that to me was, even forget about accounting, that was beyond accounting. It was a useful skill set to see beyond sort of any type of technical aspects, because it is important communication skills no matter which company, type of corporation you go into, getting a little bit into the change management and again, the importance of communication skills. So because of that experience, then it actually took me to another opportunity where I applied to leave KPMG, and I spent 2 years at the Washington, D.C. Securities and Exchange Commission, so our government. So I spent a 2 years fellowship they call professional accounting fellow. And I worked in that department directly dealing with regulators on how do you set accounting standards, how do you set things like a project that I worked on was the climate related disclosure requirements for public companies in the US. And then after those 2 years went by, I decided to come back and rejoin the firm. And now I'm a partner back in Los Angeles area. So that leads sort of a meandering path, but all of it kind of were building blocks to ultimately where I am now. And I think that goes to speak of this picture here at the upper left-hand corner, the key to multiple doors. Because when I first joined the firm, if you asked me, I didn't think I would have stayed for that long and still be there and be a partner, which is sort of the highest level that you can attain from a ranking perspective at the firm. And I've also never thought I would go work for the government and have the opportunity to be one of the professional accounting fellow and get exposure to how the policy setting within the US works specific to businesses and accounting. So those are sort of hidden surprises, I would say, but just because I was in the accounting field, that opened so many different doors for me that I think is very valuable and worthwhile to highlight, contrary to, again, that perception of, once you're an accountant, you're just going to be a bean counter and crunching numbers all your career, right? So that's a little bit of where I have been and where I am at. Now then, let's talk a little bit more about the intangibles that goes with this profession. So, okay, great. Like, it sounds like I moved around quite a bit. I have a lot of good experiences, exposure. But, like, what really, if you peel back the onion, what goes behind it? So, I would share a little bit of some of my favorite things when I tell students or others who are looking to join the profession as a whole, what I think are kind of valuable, regardless if you stay in the profession for long term or not. So I think first on the upper left-hand side, quite colorful, a lot of pictures, is a lot of learning new skills and development all the time. Like I mentioned, not a dull moment. I think the technology platform of how we do audit have evolved over the last decade or so. I also have a dual hat that I didn't mention earlier. In addition to doing financial statement audits, I also work in our sustainability practice within the firm. So I also do sustainability audit work, meaning if a company wants to get some form of audit opinion or assurance over things like their greenhouse gas emission or their social metrics or governance information that they put out as part of what they call their ESG, environmental social governance information, we do that. And I'm part of that team that delivers it. So that has been a lot of new skills and expansion and learning that. And I do that for both kind of the audit side as well as the consulting side, helping companies navigate through complex regulation requirements on the sustainability space and how do they get into a ready position for that ultimate reporting. There's also new skills that we're learning. Like I mentioned, AI, to say the least, is top of mind. We get trained on items pretty early on because in order to effectively talk to our clients about what they're dealing with or what they need to anticipate to deal with, we as professionals get kind of early access to a lot of that so that we are prepared to do that as well. So to me, I think that is a very valuable skill set of being able to continuously expand our knowledge. Then on this right-hand side, upper right-hand picture, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? I think it's a little bit of a hidden perk. If you like to do it and you want to do it, there's a lot of travel opportunities. So I primarily work on large multinational global clients of name brands that you would definitely recognize. And that, because of their international global presence, have enabled me to travel with them. One of the first clients I work on, even as an intern, and I kind of say I would call myself growing up on that account, is a Swiss-based company. And I got to go to Switzerland for 3 weeks to do an exchange with kind of the group team over there that we report into and meet the clients over there. I went to London quite a bit. I went to Brazil for some trade conferences. I also went to Asia, namely Hong Kong, to meet with some of our teams. And then most recently, I also am expanding into the Latin America side, dealing with our Mexico team quite a bit because of specific unique transactions that our clients get into. That's just to name a few of client-related travel. And if you ever dabble into our advisory consulting function, that list and frequency of travel goes even more because in the consulting business, as you might imagine, you are required and expected to travel a lot for client projects. Those I would say probably a bit more domestic driven, but nonetheless, if that's something that interests you or excites you, that is an opportunity to think about. Then when we talk about, client opportunities, right? One of the things that I like about our profession too is this kind of bottom right-hand corner. It's a stable progression, right? The firm hasn't changed too much in a sense. Like we try to refresh ourselves to make sure we stay up to speed with the market and the trends. But the hierarchy kind of follows the same. And I think it is still necessary, but also good if it's something that you like. So for me personally, I like the audit practice because you have something to look forward to every couple of years. So you join the firm as an associate, you spend roughly on average 3 years, then you get a promotion to a senior associate role. And then as a senior associate, roughly you spend another 2 to 3 years, you get promoted to a manager. And then another 2 to 3 years or so, you become senior manager. Then another couple more years, you become managing director. And then ultimately you become a partner at the firm. And so you kind of look at that. To me, I think it's a lot more palatable and have that kind of progression along the way to look forward to. It's helpful as you navigate a profession, right? Because a job, yes, certainly a year or two, but if you look at it on a longer term basis, that's a lot more palatable to think in 2-3 years term instead of a 12 to 15 years term to get to kind of like the partnership level. And then the other thing is not just you're in it alone to a certain extent, because the firms are large and we have peers that join at the same time and kind of move along the way with you. And you always, every year, by default, even after finishing your first year, you would have new people joining. So then you automatically kind of get promoted, even without the title yet, to help coach the next kind of incoming class of folks. So if you think about your 4 years in college, like when you were a senior, you are helping or having opportunities to coach kind of the freshmen and sophomores coming in. That to me, if that's something that interests you, to me, I find that valuable because it's intangible value that I can coach and mentor others while I continue to learn from those who have come ahead of me with more experience under the belt to kind of navigate the situations together, right? So I really like that collaborative aspect. And then sort of with this last picture here, a thing that I want to touch on is this job versus business. You can look at your career no matter which path or industry you decide to go into as a job. I think that's quite common, but I think it's quite rare that you can grow your job into a career and more so a business of your own. So as a partner, what does it really mean is I actually have equity share in the firm as part of the business. I am responsible not only in maintaining the current portfolio, so serving clients that we have, making sure they're happy, we keep them, we grow our services to them, but also I am enabled and empowered to bring in new business. So part of my sustainability portfolio, that is bringing in new business. I go network with people in the business world, oftentimes in the marketplace, and try to expand services that we can provide to people who might not be clients of ours currently. To me, that's kind of interesting because if you think about being an entrepreneur, like I'm not bearing the risk necessarily to go out and start my own business, but I am managing my own book of business by having a client base that I have built and potentially win over the course of time. So I find that to be interesting, attractive, that, not many business you can say you can do that as you grow into kind of a partnership model. And then, of course, I have to make a plug. You see my jacket here, it says the lake house. It is not what you kind of envision. This is maybe a funny name that we picked, but it's not truly a lakefront house that I go on holiday, but it is a KPMG owned property where it's our national training facility where we send all our professionals to at least once a year to make sure you get upskilled and trained, and make sure you network with each other so you have a national kind of relationship network built in, inherently as well. And I'll say it's one of my kind of proud things to always represent to say about KPMG because of the facility, what it offers, and the fun that it brings along with it. So as I kind of near the end of my kind of presentation here before we dive into Q&A, I just want to sum it up and say kind of what my workload looks like. And what I want to share is that it is a variety of things and it's quite fascinating. And that's something that I like because it's not boring at all, where I'm just doing one thing every day, all year long. Certainly in my days are filled with different meetings and time where mostly I'm talking to people instead of doing things. But that is part of the rewarding aspect to strategically come up with ideas to decide how to move things forward, right? So I have the financial statement audits that I mentioned that I have to manage. So I talk to the managers and the senior associates and the associates to make sure we're on track. We talked about roadblocks that we might hit, complicated situations or differences or issues that we have come up with, and discussing with the client, then how do we troubleshoot that? And then we have the sustainability assurance and advisory engagements I mentioned. Similar, right? Like kind of making sure we deliver what the client is looking for, but also making sure they're aware of latest trends, changes in the marketplace. So earlier, I spent an hour talking to a client about what the European regulations changes are expected to come on that sustainability front and potentially how we can help service and support them, right? Then we have the learning and development that I mentioned. So before I go consult and tell a client, give them advice on something, I need to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So I need to find time and leverage the firm's resources to help me educate myself. But over the course of the years, I have also grown into a position where I have helped create firm training materials and also teach them in sort of the annual training to give me a little bit of a flavor of what it would be like to be, a coach or a teacher in our space. And that's quite rewarding as well. Then we have the go-to-market activities, which I talked about. So a lot of it is, finding opportunities to either invite clients or future clients to events that the firm organizes and hosts. I have put on some events myself, so dabbling a little bit into the event planning space as well. And then lastly, with the internal roles is many different hats. So I am what we call a people management leader. So I help coach kind of employees, making sure their performance are, hitting the marks. They're getting the right opportunities to continue to upskill themselves. I am what we call a co-lead of the KPMG network of women in the LA chapter. So we host monthly board meetings, making sure we organize the events that we believe would be meaningful for both internal professionals as well as external client-facing items. And then I'm also the lead recruiting partner from the audit side for USC. So I spend time like today, lovely to get to talk to students, but a lot of times going to Leventhal as well, meeting with, different students who are interested in the profession to have more in-depth discussion on that as well. So with all that said, never a dull moment. And then last week I was traveling to New York for a client of mine, right? So spending a couple of days there and now back in LA. So all to say, I find it to be a rewarding career, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight to what we do and demystify a little bit of what you might think of accountants. So with that, I'm going to open it for question and answer. Oh, great. I already see a hand up.
Hello, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. I really enjoyed your presentation. I have two questions. So I'm an international relations major. I'm mostly interested in politics. The travel aspect definitely piqued my interest. It's always been something that I really prioritize in a future career. I'm interested in like the political risk aspect of consulting, and I was just wondering if you could provide any insights into that aspect. And then a follow-up question would just be, what would you recommend as next steps for seniors who are graduating this May in pursuing this career path? Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for the question. I think specific to the public accounting firms, right, in this advisory practice that I have mentioned, which is focused on consulting, there is a whole host of professionals, and many of them actually are not accountants or non-CPA. So that is a hopefully good alignment with kind of what you were getting towards. And we have folks like, be it lawyers, be it environmental engineers, be it sort of strategic folks who think about management strategic decisions. So political risk fits into one of them. We actually have a group called regulatory compliance, and that's sort of all they do is monitor regulations that would impact our client from both a political risk perspective, regulatory risk perspective globally. Now, I would say though, the only thing that could be challenging is might not always hire directly out of university. A lot of them expect sort of some work experience in the marketplace before joining. But nonetheless, that is something that has potential path down the line as it relates to um, advisory consulting opportunities. In terms of next steps related to that, I think what at least I know all the big four firm does, including my firm, is that we do have kind of advisory information session panels that come to campus periodically. And you can better understand what the immediate needs are that could stem from right out of college and gauge from there. The other thing I would say also is don't forget to use your alumni network at SC because it is very strong, be it, directly in the school that you're in or outside. So that's something I would say continue to network and make sure you take advantage of that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I guess with in saying how like a lot of times they don't hire directly out of university, they want prior work experience. That's something I've encountered a lot. But then what are prior work experiences? Because it seems like everything wants that. You know what I mean? So what could be like a first work?
Yeah, so I think honestly, there's nothing that's too small. So think about, especially if you're in political risk, right? Like think of law firm, even not for profit sometimes, like governmental, state, level agencies that have the ability to just give you something to springboard from, I think would be beneficial.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sorry if there's a little background noise. I'm in transit here. I appreciate you taking some time to chat and give us an overview, especially some insight on your sustainability work. I'm currently looking for work in that sustainability space and kind of what you highlighted there. Um, Despite my kind of preconceptions of the consulting space, it's looked like consulting is a great area for me to take action there. And so I'm wondering, as somebody who is maybe looking to either take that step into sustainability consulting or get that first job on the way to sustainability consulting, is there like a true skill or like kind of an emerging area that you see expertise in, like being very, very valuable and helpful? Is it a specific hard skill? Is it more so understanding the space? I'd appreciate a little insight there and really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Of course, yeah. That is a very common question in terms of how to navigate the sustainability space right now. I think if you take a step in, right, like sort of how I described accounting, there's so many doors you could open, similar with sustainability. So you can think about if you want to do sustainability consulting, are you trying to help a company with the actual actions that they could take? So think about decarbonization as one, right? If they need to reduce their emission, there are scientific ways to reduce and what we call decarbonize. If you're going things like that way, for example, then I would agree, probably need some basic hard skills to understand sources of emissions, scientific understanding of that, and then how to effectively coach them and understand sort of what are the organizations out in the marketplace that credentialize that, right? So where carbon offsets coming from, what are some trade and cap programs that people look to? And then find ways to join organizations through there to gain your work experience as a launch pad to go from there. If you're saying, that sounds fine, but I'm not really wanting to narrow into specific, technical areas, then there's this kind of broader, what I do in a sense, the reporting space. So many companies are trying to navigate right now with California laws that are coming in to require emissions reporting, as well as climate risk assessment and narrative reporting, and then also some European regulations coming in. The reporting space is looking, many companies are trying to look for people that have that experience to help them navigate that. So then the question also comes back in first, like, how do I get my foot into the door for those? And I think some of that is a little bit of, you can either do, many companies I know offer kind of management rotational programs. Those are usually good to give you a flavor to get into it. The other piece is think about sort of the supply chain aspect that they have. If you're not going to go the accounting route, is to work in sort of the procurement space of a company, because that has information flow into reporting. So once you get into the door of a corporation, it is arguably, if you have decent performance, easier to rotate and get opportunities into the other departments that way. So many of my clients, sustainability reporting folks that I interact with now, actually come from different divisions within the company previously and stepping into that role. The other thing that you could look into is some of these, I would say, emerging growth company in the marketplace that's either technology focused on how to crack the issue right now that many companies are facing, is how do I not manually figure out how to do these emission reporting, as an example. So there are companies like, Persephone as one, Watershed is another, Apex is another. They're all out there with sort of consulting services that they provide to companies on how do you implement either their system platform to do some of that in a more automated way, and then ultimately to help them strategically identify opportunities to streamline their reporting. So I think those are ways that you could look into joining as a starting point, and then springboarding from there to whatever else you might want to do. Yeah, Harris?
Hi. I just want to first say thank you for taking time out of your day to kind of give us this insight into your work, as it's very motivating. And kind of the one question I had was talking about like what potentially might be one like major challenge you kind of faced in working for such a like big company and like this field of business that I think if you were say if you were still in college or university, you would kind of tell yourself to be prepared for to like encounter.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great question. I think there are a few things. One, I think, is the larger the corporation, and especially like I mentioned, that we come in classes. Like I think just intern class alone for the LA office is roughly around 30 to 35 each year. You could get lost in the mix, right? So how do you strategically find out a way so that you are not coming across as always eager to try to get ahead of your peers, but still showing proactiveness? And that is a social soft skill that I think is critical no matter what level of the career you go through, right? So I think one of the things is, if you are going to join a large corporation, you need to read the lay of your land, make sure you network appropriately, because don't just focus on your department or division. Any other Like I have peers and friends in tax and advisory as well who are critical in helping my success along the way in times of need, right? So those are things I think you should watch out for. And then also making sure you don't stop sort of learning. I think that is really key. I think many people think, oh, once you get stability in a job, then that's sort of the school mindset of continuous to learn, as well as continuing to build your network and extracurricular, I would call, kind of goes away. But especially for a large corporation like this, to be having a platform to be recognized and not getting lost in the shuffle. I do think those, like I mentioned, right, like getting onto the no KPMG network of women, like co-lead board, like those are things that you need to proactively seek out to make sure you are seen.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. Oh, Nathan.
Hi, thank you so much for your time today. I just had a general question about in terms of applying for, the internship.
Mm.
Since it is like a very competitive company, what are just some general like advice and tips that you would give for prospective students that are looking to be able to gain an advantage or be able to stand out from the crowd since there are a lot of competitive and talented applicants?
Yeah, I think it is continuing to get more and more competitive. You're absolutely right. I think one thing you can take comfort is USC does prepare you quite well. Okay. And especially for public accounting firms, right? Like unlike, let's say, a iBanking position where they'll be asking you a ton of technical questions. For public accounting, usually the questions that stem in are what we call behavioral questions. So it's situational, asking you to tell stories. Give me a time, describe this, describe that. And why that is important is goes back to the soft skills. Make sure you communicate and articulate and can share stories in a succinct manner that help an interviewer within 3 to 5 minutes, right? Really get a good feel of you. And those stories and experiences comes from what? True experiences. So if you think about along the way in your schoolwork, right? Like as you go through it, try to find experiences and opportunities that you could turn them into stories to showcase your overall skill set that would be transferable into a large corporate firms like be it KPMG or any other kind of public accounting firm. And those usually anchor around dealing with difficult situation, prioritizing your time under pressure. How do you navigate and be creative in finding a solution, not just finding problems, right? So as you kind of continue on and prepare, I think those would be things that helps. And then the other thing is well-roundedness. Like I think bottom line, I think I've emphasized quite a bit that we work a lot in teams environment, no matter audit, tax, or advisory. So do you provide sort of a view into yourself that you're not just going to be there to do the work and then leave, right? Can you fit in to be part of the team? What value would you bring in from a unique personality perspective? So those are things I definitely say could help you stand out. And then last but not least is network. I can't underemphasize the point of, or overemphasize, I should say, on networking. Because go to the career fair, meet with whoever you can from the firms that you're interested in. And during your interview, I think those will come clear for you to cite specific examples of what you have learned about the firms and talk about why that drive your interest and desire to be part of the firm.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I hear.
So yeah, I have another question. It's kind of just about KPMG in general and like your experience with the company. So I want to ask like what company like event slogan or like unique perspective you think it brings that displays the type of company like you or your peers try to and present yourself as. Um, so how would you like what specific aspect of the company or KPMG do you think really stands out to you, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that is a common question, and I would say it is quite intangible because my answer is going to be it's the people and the culture. If you think about it, we don't sell any products. Like we're not manufacturing a Pepsi soda or Bose headphones that you can give a review on. It's people are the biggest assets of the firm. We go out and we represent the firm to our clients, and the work product we deliver is what, as well as the client experience, is what defines KPMG at the end of the day, right? And so if you think about, well, what am I most proud of, or how do we go out and tell people what is KPMG's culture and what do we believe? And I think there are a few key things. I think one is we are people oriented in a sense that one of the core values that we have is called together for better, because we really don't believe in individualism to a certain extent when it comes to teamwork and client delivery, and that we need to support each other and bring others up, as well as help support our peers in terms of cross-functional sharing and support as well, right? So I think to me, that is really important. And the other thing is the flexibility and support within the culture is not necessarily like cutthroat, like, oh, if I'm going to succeed today, then that means you have to fail. Like, that is not at all. It's really about, again, collaborativeness, bringing together everybody's average as a whole from a knowledge, delivery, experience, skill set perspective. So I think to me, those are some of the important things. And back to the lake house story that I shared, right? About 6 years ago, the firm decided to start building our own nationwide training facility in Florida, and because of the importance of bringing people together. And it's a facility where, from our interns all the way to partners and even our CEO, like, we go there and you could run into anybody during that time, because they have, senior associate training happening when the strategic leadership executive management teams go to market meetings are happening at the same time, and you can run into them and they will talk to you. So that's sort of the culture that we're bringing in. And then also the flexibility of, it's not just all about work. The industry is tough, right? I think I would be remiss to say, oh, it's like an 8-hour day job. That is not the case. But there are tough times, but there are also fun times that we balance. And we want to value that and cherish that. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavor of our culture.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Great. I think those are all some really good questions. Anything else in the remaining couple minutes? Okay, well, you all can feel free, if you would like, find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to stay connected with, students and others that I meet. But otherwise, John, thank you so much again for reaching out and facilitating this today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the students who came and joined live and asked such amazing questions. Please follow Anita Chan, find her on LinkedIn, visit her, and utilize this resource that is the Trojan Network. That's the last thing I'll say.
That's right. Well, fight on, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.